Hello and greetings from Great Barrington, Massachusetts. I'm Karen Christensen, talking to colleagues around the world about topics that I write about at Karen's Letter. We often talk about books. Sustainability is always a focus. I latched onto this saying, think globally, act locally, when I was very young, and it sums up what you'll find at this podcast about the way we live now. Good morning. I'm Karen Christensen, and I'm so delighted to talk to Professor Carlos Moreno, who I assume is in Paris right now. And we're going to be talking about his concept, well known to many, the 15-minute city. Professor Moreno is a very international figure, having been born in Colombia, yes, but I assume you've been in France for quite a long time now, and you've been spreading your ideas around the world and seeing some of it implemented. So for those who don't know the concept 15-minute city, please, could you just give us some background, some history, and explain it, and then we'll go into some of the details.
Thank you so much, dear Karen, for this kind invitation, and of course, greetings from Paris to audience. I am Carlos Moreno, professor at Sorbonne University in Paris, researcher. I'm neither urbanist nor architect. My background is mathematics and computer science. For a long time, I have worked on electronics, computer science, and digital technologies for the intelligent control of infrastructures. I have started to work in cities 25 years ago, in particular after the emergence of internet, when I was one of the contributors for the smart city concept. After the emergence of internet, the smart city concept was a technological way for developing more capabilities for cities for managing smart infrastructures. In fact, I have decided to switch from smart technologies towards more livable cities, more living cities in 2010. And I have coined the concept of the 50-minute city in 2016. The first part of my contribution for cities was under the flagship smart cities. After 2010, I have decided to contribute more oriented towards the polycentric and multi-service cities.
And where did the concept start? Why 15 minutes? Why not 20 minutes or 10?
Yeah, this is a very, very often question by interviewers. In fact, the core of my research after 2010 was to switch from a techno-centered way for cities. Just we need to remember that the smart city was this idea that it would be possible to improve the quality of life in cities by the massive use of technologies, actuators, sensors, algorithms. And in fact, I consider in 2010 two elements. The first one, the most significant global threat for cities, for citizens dwelling in cities, is the global warming. Cities are the most important contributor of CO2 emissions. Cities are the most important consumption of energies, and cities are the most important producer of poverty, even if the essential of wealth is created in cities. Technologies are not available for fighting against this triple challenge: ecology, for fighting against global warming; poverty, for developing more local economy, more employment, more added value; and more inclusiveness, for fighting against social exclusion. The Professor Mohamed Yunus, my friend, one of my masters, wrote a book in 2010, A World of Triple Zero: Zero Carbon, Zero Poverty, Zero Exclusion. I took this concept of the Professor Yunus in 2010. I embraced as well the commitment of the C40 cities, the global network of metropolises for fighting against climate change. And I said, we need to change the shape of cities. We are in cities the most important contributor of CO2 because the essential CO2 emissions are concentrated in transportation, long distances, the massive use of diesel cars, and the presence of corporate business district in particular by these solidifications, segmentation, fractured cities that have produced these daily long distances. The 50-minute city, when I proposed this concept after the COP21 in Paris in 2016,
I see, yeah.
was an idea for reducing our long daily commute, for reducing the CO2 footprint of the individual cars, for reducing the strong, massive air pollution by diesel cars. For that, I said that if we have more services within a short perimeter, if we have commerce, jobs, local activities, medical services, schools, high schools,
Yes.
cinemas,
Yeah.
theaters, we could at the same time to reduce our compulsory mobilities, compulsory commute. We could foster more people to have a low carbon mobility on foot or by bike, or to use masses for public transportation. And at the same time, we could foster the increase of a more local economy, local employment, local activities, local services in all city, not only in several places, but in all city. Why 15 minutes? This is just a nickname. The real important point is to change the shape of the city. For 7 decades, we have developed a zonified city, segmented city, segregated city, gentrified city with a lot of long commute. We have lost our useful time.
Yes, indeed, especially in
We
the
have
United States, but elsewhere as well.
particularly with the sprawl city.
Yeah.
I said we need, in fact, to change our individual mindset. We need to change our individual behavior for considering short distances as a real benefit. Benefit for planet with a strong reduction of CO2 emissions. Benefit for our urban health because we will have less polluted city on foot or by bike. A more local employment for developing, for example, more local things based on raw materials to develop a more local commerce, local activities. I said 50 minutes because Andy Warhol said 50 minutes, this is a good time for having a moment of celebrity. In reality, 50 minutes is not so far. It's not at home. This is the neutral distance
Well,
This
it's
is the friendship
interesting.
distance.
You put quite a lot in your book, your new book, The 15-Minute City, about concepts of time and how we measure time and urban time. Very, very interesting. For an American, my first thought when I heard 15 minutes, I can walk about a mile in 15 minutes. So it's just
Yeah,
it's not very far. It's psychologically 15
exactly.
minutes is, you go, oh, 15 minutes. I was reading a Victorian novel and someone was going to walk, said, oh, it's only 3 miles. I'll just walk. But we don't think
Exactly.
that.
We have in mind that 15 minutes, this is the natural time. We could wait anyone 15 minutes. This is a
Yeah.
just excuse me, I have this delay, but this is good. This is not so far, but this is not too short.
Do
This
you
is the
find
natural distance.
do you find that that's true all over the world? Because so many cultural things, ideas about personal space, for example,
Yeah,
are very different. Do you find that the 15-minute concept, though, the time concept works for pretty, because Italians, I was just talking to someone in Italy and she was saying, oh, Italians have a very different idea about time. But but this idea, the 15 minutes seems to kind of work. It plays well around the
yeah,
world. Is that correct?
yes, yes. In fact, Karen, I would like to say to the audience that in reality, even if I have proposed 15-minute city, this idea was to imagine a short perimeter in, in the high density zone. We have a lot of people that live in suburbs, that live in rurality areas. I proposed at the same time the term 30 minutes territory for the medium and low density zone. When people live in a high density area, 15 minutes in a polycentric city, anytime, anywhere, and easier access to a lot of different services is a good way for having a more livable city. In the medium and low density areas, in ruralities, we need to have more time for commuting, for going. This is necessary to mix while capability by capability, electric vehicles, car sharing, on demand transport. And I said 50-minute city for high density zone, 30 minutes territory for medium and low density zone. 4 years after, today, in 2024, we have around the world lot of different nicknames for the same concept.
Mm-hmm.
For example, in Australia, in Melbourne, the program implemented is 20 minute neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
In Scotland, in UK, the Scotland Parliament has voted the strategic framework for with the name 20 minutes Scotland territory.
Uh-huh.
In Netherlands, in Utrecht, a really iconic bike-capable city, the most bike-capable city in the world. In general, we have in the morning more than 300,000 bikes in the railway station in Utrecht.
300 back.
300,000 bikes in the railway station every day. We have lot of bike jams. This is not traffic jam of cars. Bike jams. The mayor said we need to launch a campaign for switching from bikes to buses, for example.
Yeah.
What is the reason? That lot of people take a bike for crossing the city, for commuting from home to an
Mm-hmm.
office. Now, the city of Utrecht has launched the program 10-minute city for offering more decentralized services.
Uh-huh.
Instead of to cross the city with a bike, it's more interesting to offer more decentralized services in proximity for reducing these bike jams. The name is the 10-minute city. And we have, for example, in South America, the name is the complete neighborhood, the vital districts. We have today around the world lot of different nicknames. I said very often that today we have a new wave, the wave of the X minute city, the X minute territory. The most important point for our audience is to understand that this concept, we need to highlight three elements: polycentric city or polycentric territory, multi-center, lot of different
Mhm.
polarities, lot of
Different. Yes.
different
Yes.
places. Second one, multi-services, to offer lot of different mixed services, commerce, jobs, medical services, culture, etc.
Goals.
And the
Yes. Yeah.
and the third one, to develop the social mixity,
Mhm.
the mixity of different social categories for fighting against gentrification. This is the three most important points: polycentric city, multi-services city, and social mixed city.
Mhm.
The name X minute city, X minute territory is not a problem, the number of minutes.
I've seen that you use the term proximity quite often because that I think is a good, as an adjective is a good one because it's got a positive connotation. It's it's funny that as soon as if you've lived with services and social life nearby that you can get to easily, I think you never want to go back to anything else. But a lot of people aren't familiar with that. It makes them I was thinking about Americans, and I'm sure you've talked to lots of Americans, and I'm delighted to see that, for example, in Cleveland, you have, I mean, that
Yeah.
which is a big old industrial city. So it's a very interesting case. But a lot of Americans have no experience with proximity. They've spent their whole lives with everything scattered, no kids nearby. You think of young people growing up, no shops that you could walk to. So the it, there's an imaginative leap that it requires. I would like you to tell us a little bit about France. I think for Americans, and I'm sure other people, we think Paris and we think pretty little villages, but ki- but France is much more complex than that. And you do have suburbs, and you do have commuting, and people do drive cars. So it's not just this bucolic, the kind of, the tourist view. So, you know, how are you implementing these different approaches within your own country?
Yes, you're right. I went recently to the USA for launching my last book published by Wiley. I visited six different cities: Los Angeles, Chicago, New Orleans, Washington, Cincinnati, New York. And of course, we need to understand the particular context of each one of cities that we wanted to implement this concept. Today, this concept, the X minute city, the happy polycentric proximity. I think that this is the more general
Mhm.
nickname. Proximity, polycentric, and happiness. Happy polycentric proximity. What is the situation today, for example, in the USA? You're right. The context in the USA is no easier for this kind of concept, given that the predominant role, on the one hand, of the individual cars, because in the USA, it exists a strong car dependency for a long time. But this codependency is really intertwined with the shape of the city, in particular, the zonified areas for working, the corporate business district, for example, on the one hand, and the other hand, the suburbs. The suburbs where live people in a single function, just housing. And at the opposite, in the corporate business district, the essential of buildings have a single function to work. And we are, in reality, in permanence, confronted to this daily long commute for going from my home to my offices by car. And the sprawling cities in the USA, in reality, was at the same time lifestyle.
Mm.
This lifestyle, in reality, today in the 21st century, we could consider that this is an unsustainable lifestyle. Maybe it was the model in the USA for the 20th century. However, today, in the 21st century, in face with global warming, in face with this global threat, in face with the extreme meteorological events present in all USA, we need to switch. This is today totally compulsory to switch towards another lifestyle and our work style to change our mindset. When the mayor, Justin Bieber, in Cleveland, has launched his ambitious program, Cleveland 15-minute city, he has decided to invest more than $200 million in this automotive city
It's a very
for
interesting example. Very interesting example.
breaking out the traditional model of the 20th century of an automotive city towards a more livable city, a more inclusive city, more mixed city with a more social mixity, more functional mixity, and to transform the city. This is the case in Portland. Portland is really pioneer city.
Mhm.
The 20 minutes city neighborhood program in Portland. Portland is a city member of the C40 Cities Global Network. Portland has launched this initiative in the Oregon state for decarbonized city. Seattle, in the
Did
north
we
of the
have a
USA.
question about Portland for you? And I wonder if this is relevant to Cleveland too. One thing I've only been to Portland, Oregon, you mean? Uh,
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
one of the things I was struck by when I went to Portland some years back is that it has a beautiful downtown. I was
Mhm,
surprised. It had a
mhm.
very substantial old downtown, and I'm sure Cleveland does as well. Do you think that that helps when is still the bones of an old city, a sort of pre-car city?
Yeah. In the case of Cleveland, it's so interesting because Cleveland was one of the key cities in Ohio for developing the economy based on the automotive production.
Mhm.
When I wrote my book, I did intensive research for exploring the morphology of the city of Cleveland at the beginning of the last century, the development of the industrial
Mhm.
productions. And it was a city totally focused in the automotive production with the presence of, as well, of the working class
Mhm.
and the racial segregation,
Mhm.
because in Cleveland we have as well a lot of black people
Yes, there would have been the
with
migration
the
from the South, yes.
yeah
Yeah,
the direction of the South.
yeah.
When Martin Luther King was killed, his next step for visiting will be Cleveland.
Mm. Yeah.
He was killed in Memphis. But
Yeah.
the next city for Martin Luther King was Cleveland.
Clayton.
And
Yeah.
the Black population, of course, was in the way for having more access to civic rights. The first Black mayor, I think that was Carl, the mayor of Cleveland. I think
Oh.
that
Uh-huh.
he was the first Black mayor elected.
Uh-huh.
This is very important because in the case of the city of Cleveland, we have three different aspects. The first one, to switch from the traditional 20th century economy based in the automotive productions.
Yeah.
The second one, to offer better conditions to the working class because the morphology of the city of Cleveland was generated by the automotive factories and people that live around the factory.
Uh-huh.
And the black people live in the segregation, in a segregative situation, because we had this cumulative.
Yeah. With, I'm sure, a great deal of
Uh,
pollution and all the other attendant problems.
exact,
Yeah.
exact pollution, low incomes, low incomes, and so and racial segregation.
Yeah.
The challenge for a city as Cleveland, it's absolutely passionate because they need to open the city, they need to open the neighborhood, they need to open the condition of social housing for developing a more mixed of the social categories.
You're trying
Food,
to solve many problems together, but I think your point is that they need to be solved together. That you
yeah,
don't solve, these things in isolation, that in fact, what you want is a solution that will, kind of trigger it changes on all levels, which is, certainly I mean, my big interest is the social side of it. So that integration is hugely important.
yeah.
Um,
The effort of the mayor Justin Bieber with the
mhm,
50-minute city
yeah.
is an effort for developing a more social integration,
Mhm,
more social mixity, for switching from the mono automotive industry towards a more multi industry, multi jobs places for delocalizing, for offering another perspective of the traditional perspective, and to regenerate the social fabric and to regenerate as well the social housing. Don't forget that in 2008, during the last economical crisis of the subprimes,
mhm.
this area of Cleveland was one of the most impacted in the USA by the subprime crisis because
Yeah.
a lot of, in particular, black people
Oh,
was
the
totally,
subprime mortgages,
yeah,
yes. Yeah.
yeah, the subprime mortgages. One of the most social people impacted was the black population that
Yes.
was totally involved in this crisis.
Yeah.
And they had the difficulties for renting after, for renting, for having a house
Yes.
in the good condition. Yeah.
Yeah.
Today, the effort of the mayor Justin Bieber with the 50-minute city, with the polycentric city, is to offer better conditions for having a more integrated city. And this is the sense of the 50-minute city.
Mhm.
Polycentric city, social integration, social mixity, functional mixity, and to switch from the mono industries, from the mono economy towards a more open sources economy.
You visited a real range of cities. I'm just thinking about the difference between a city like Cleveland and Portland and Los Angeles, or
Plus,
New Orleans, of course, has its own very unique set of issues. Did did you did you find common were there common themes or Did you see solutions that might be applicable in all those cities, or do you think each city needs its own very distinct approach?
In reality, we need to be so adaptive for understanding the particular context and to imagine with this content how could we improve the quality of life for reshaping our city. For example, in Chicago or New Orleans. New Orleans, the first one.
Yeah.
New Orleans is a passionate city. Do you know New Orleans has suffered for the racial segregation, of course. This
Yes.
is a historical situation in New Orleans. The Black community, in particular, has suffered of this intensive social racial segregation. But at the same time, the economical segregation and the urban segregation, the district for Black people, working class, marginalized population. Secondly, we have unfortunately the amazing meteorological events, in particular Katrina, uh,
Yes.
that have impacted New Orleans 25 years ago in 2005, I think.
That seems
Uh, yeah,
I don't-
almost $1 billion impacted. In general, the population impacted by this kind of event are unfortunately the poor population, and in the case of the New
yes.
Orleans, poor Black population.
Yeah.
I I I went to New Orleans recently to work with my colleagues at the University of New Orleans. The students, I visited New Orleans, and we have decided to launch interesting program for the urban regeneration of the one of the districts of the New Orleans, the Hoffman Triangle. The Hoffman Triangle, this is one of the areas when we have this situation, and at the same time, we have the different leadership of communities interested in to reweaving the social fabric to redevelop this action for a better community building and to have the support of the private sector, of the economical private sector, in order to generate more local employment and more local
Uh-huh.
activity. In a city as New Orleans, it is impossible to have a magic wand or a magic dust for saying we will solve in just a few years the problem that in fact are the problem for several decades.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, we need three different convergence commitments. The first one, political will of the local governance for saying we need to develop New Orleans low carbon for fighting against climate change because New Orleans is always in the critical zone
Yes.
of the
Yeah, that's
meteorological
not gonna
impact.
change. Yeah.
But we need to reduce our CO2 footprint. Secondly, we need to develop a more local vibrant economy. We need the support of the private sector for generating more jobs, more local activities, not in some points of the city, in all city. And third one, we need to reweaving the social fabric for fighting against the social exclusion and the racial exclusion.
Right. I mean,
The 50-minute city, this is a way. This is this is not targeted cells. The 50-minute city is not a targeted cell. The 50-minute city, this is a mean for regenerating our city in these three elements: ecological, economical, and social positive impact.
and New Orleans is such a social culture that, that is seems to me, they would be responsive. Community is really important there. But obviously there's, all kinds of challenges as well. Can you, during the time we've talked about cities. What about small towns? I live in a small town. I've lived in big cities, but I live in a small town. And it actually is 15 minutes for me for many things. But there's still people jump in their car to drive, even a short distance. How do you kind of change the way, even in an area or in a suburb? I mean, one of the things that intrigues me is the idea of leverage points or starting points. How do you start these things? How can you advise people who are interested in this concept to create some momentum wherever they are, whether it's a small town, a city, or a suburb?
Yes, this is two different things. A small town and the suburbs. What is the difference? A suburbs is in reality in a urban area characterized by the strong different buildings in a single functions only a residential way. A small town could be a more isolated area, more rural area. The question of the rural area, we have today a lot of very, very great experiences around the world in the rural area,
Mm.
in different
Mhm.
continents.
Mhm.
In the rural area, today, for example, we could observe how this concept, the X minutes territory, 30 minutes territory, or the complete area. This is the case, for example, in Scotland, in Poland. We have a lot of different rural area. The keyword in the rural area is mutualization. To author in a rural area, local rural policy or local small town policy for offering different services and to identify other small towns in the same region, for example, for generating the technical name is the grid area. For example, we have a small town in a place. We have another small town 10 miles close. We have another small town 20 miles close.
Mhm.
The idea, in fact, is to take this different small town for regenerating different services for having a grid area instead of to have for each one of small town a swimming pool, exhibition center, sport area, a convention center. We could mutualize different services for sharing them between the different with each one the small towns will have the capability for offering different services, but with this intertwined policy to create a more optimized use of the different infrastructure of different resources. At the same time, with the new technologies, with the digital technologies, we could activate a lot of different new services instead of to build the infrastructure. For example, we have today the possibility for accessing to medical services by the remote digital technologies. We
Yeah.
could access to the culture activities. We could access to the educational activities using new technologies. This is the second point. Third point, we have today new market plan for small towns for be more attractive, for offering places for hosting workers for 2 days, 3 days, with the new hybridization work styles. In particular, the young workers between 20 years old until 40 years old prefer to mix to work in a big city, but at the same time to go for the more long weekend in the small cities and small ruralities. We could develop this new attractiveness for offering more quite ambience,
It,
more quiet atmosphere.
as what we say, the best of both worlds. But we need then public transportation
Yeah,
between
you're
these
right.
places. So
You're
it's
right.
not
You're
just
right.
people driving cars back and forth. Yeah.
You're right. You're right. One of the difficulties is this accessibility because, unfortunately, the question of public transportation is really complicated. I went to Chicago recently, for example. I was at the center of Chicago for different meetings, different activities, and I needed to go to Englewood. Englewood is the resilient community building in the outskirts
Mm-hmm.
of Chicago.
Uh-huh.
The Englewood project, this very, very nice project based on the idea of 50-minute city.
Uh-huh.
The Englewood project, this is to revamp the former factory to
Uh-huh.
reuse
Uh-huh.
the new lands for developing urban agriculture, for creating the new green corridor, for developing more second, third life of things, for generating this a new life cycle of the economy. This was really, really interesting project, Inglewood project. But for going from Chicago to
You had to get
Englewood,
there.
yeah, I said, uh, I will take a bus.
Yep.
19 minutes. Okay, we take car, 25 minutes. This is a real problem because
Right. And you're lucky there even was a bus. Plenty of places in America. I mean, I live on the East Coast, so we do have some trains. But you go out west, people say, but there's no, there's nothing. Most Americans have never been on a train ever because they don't exist where we live. So, there's this. I mentioned the psychology of getting people to think the world could be different, the way we live could be different, and it could be better. Is really what you're working on. Is developing this, this idea, this concept, and saying all the different ways in which it would make the world better, a better place to live, but make individual
yeah,
lives better, right?
mm, totally, I agree totally. I have another anecdote where
Mm-hmm.
when I went I went in California, for example, for I was to Los Angeles. I went to Los Angeles. I went to Santa Monica, and the reality is that the train doesn't exist. Why doesn't exist the public transportation by train in the USA? I discussed with several colleagues specialized in the history of public transportation in the USA. They said that the automotive companies in the 20th century prefer to buy the train companies, the rail infrastructures, just for stopping this mobility and for switching
Was
from the road.
competition pure and simple. Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And they said the automotive companies, the automotive lobby has become a very powerful economic corporation company. And the idea was to buy the different rail companies just for stopping this activity
They made
and
they
to
made them less convenient, they ran less frequently, and then there were fewer passengers. It became a downward spiral and very deliberate. Yes, very,
yeah,
very much business competition.
people were constrained to change from the rail transportation toward the automotive transportation because the rail transportation, in fact, was stopped in lot of places in the USA, even in North America, for example,
Yeah.
in Vancouver. In Vancouver, the most important train in Vancouver was stopped in 60s by the decision of the automotive company to buy this infrastructure for stopping
But
and
there is one
to
piece
build
of
the
good news is that the train tracks and the right of ways still exist. They're used for freight, but there is actually a vast
exactly.
railway network that could be
Exactly.
used again. That is one bit of silver lining. But it is a challenge here, and we're envious of the French rail.
Yeah.
Everyone tells me, some people say that France has the very best
Yeah.
trains in the world. There are probably a couple other countries that compete, but it's
Yeah.
admirable indeed.
Mm.
Well,
Yeah.
we could obviously go on talking for ages, but I'm grateful to you. I'm going to ask you, what else would you like to make sure that those who listen to this know about the 15-minute city and so I wanted to talk to you because, of course, our attention will be on Paris next week as the Olympics begin, and there will be,
Yeah.
I'm sure that some of the work that's being done in Paris in terms of making it a livable city and preparing for the Olympics, people will be hearing about this. So, some thoughts for us on that?
Yeah. Yes. We are very, very proud of the impact of Olympic Games, in particular the program developed by our mayor, Anne Hidalgo. I want to pay a tribute in permanence to Anne Hidalgo, given that she is a real visionary,
Mm.
determined, a courageous mayor. She has embraced the 50-minute city concept in November 2018. And after the election in 2020, she has implemented a real ambitious program. This Olympic game is the amazing opportunity for showing to the worldwide
World. Yeah.
how could we implement
Mm.
this concept. The Olympic game, for example, in Paris, are the first Olympic Games in the modernity to have the opening ceremony no longer in a stadium, inside a stadium, but among the Seine River.
Oh.
This is so important. We have the Seine River, and the totality of the Seine River was managed for having the défilé of the different delegations, the sport delegations, in the Seine River, with the spectators of the both sides of the bank of the river. For this Olympic Games, the decision was, in fact, to build only 3% of infrastructure. 97% of infrastructure is only the reuse of infrastructure that exists or the temporary
Uh-huh.
infrastructure. For example, beach volley is under the Eiffel Tower. We have the Eiffel Tower.
Uh-huh.
We have built the provisory beach volley field. In the Concorde Square, this is the iconic Concorde Square, we have another place for different sports. In the Champ de Mars, in front of Invalides, we have created the other provisory infrastructures for hosting different competitions. In all city, in the different points, we have different infrastructure for hosting. This is not concentrated in a way. This is decentralized in the idea of the 50-minute
Uh-huh.
city,
Uh-huh.
anywhere, anytime to offer services. In this case, anytime, anywhere, we have in all city different places
Uh-huh.
for competition. We have welcomable city as well. We have the essential of the center city. We have the only welcomable bikeable path for this period of the Olympic
Uh-huh.
game.
Uh-huh.
We have banned the cars of the center of the city. This is the real transformation. And the the cherry of the cake, the mayor of Paris yesterday has had the first swimming in the Seine River
Oh,
for the
I've
first
heard
time.
about this. I've heard about this swimming, yeah, which is just amazing to think of, yeah.
For the first time,
So she went
100
in,
years
did she?
after, yeah, the swimming.
Good for her.
Yeah, yeah. This is historical.
Yeah, yeah.
She she worked very, very hard to offer to Parisians yesterday for the first time the swimming River Sena.
Uh-huh. This are we gonna be next time I go to Paris, will I be able to swim in the Seine?
Yeah, yeah. This is
Really?
the case today.
Wow. I went to a fantastic public pool in Paris. Amazing old bath, but I'd swim in the Seine instead.
Oh,
How cool is that? Well, we will be watching with great interest, and I'm really excited about the idea that this will give us a way to think about the possibilities for the future. We really need to have some positive things to positive ideas in mind at a challenging time. And I'm so grateful to you for the work that you've been doing for years and the work that you're obviously very much in the thick
yeah.
of right now. Thank you. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you,
It's
Karen.
really a delight.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you
take
for
care.
your kind invitation.
Thank you.
Take care as
Bye.
well. Have a good summer.
You too. You too. And have a good Olympics. Okay. Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining me at The Way We Live Now, a podcast where we roam the world for ideas and inspiration and talk about tools that will help to make the world a better place. I'd really love to have your ideas and comments. Please leave a comment below and subscribe to the feed. You can sign up for my newsletter, which I try to make a real letter, at karenchristensen.substack.com.